I know what this looks like. I promise you this is not a beer. Hello and welcome back to my channel. We're doing December reading wrap-up, which I know it's a bit late this month, but to my defense, I had loads of videos to do on the books I read in 2025. So here we are, talking about December books at the end of January. Before we jump into talking about books, shall we talk a little bit about Christmas and Christmas presents? The holidays always seem to go so fast, and I always like to hear about what other people got for Christmas and which was their favorite present. So let me tell you about mine, and maybe you can tell me about yours in the comments. One of my favorite presents I am holding in my hand right now. This is my new teacup. You may not know this about me, that I have recently become a bit of a tea snob because I will only drink loose leaf tea. I promise you, once you try it, there's no going back. So I've been drinking black loose leaf tea, but recently I also really wanted to switch to herbal tea, but I don't drink as much herbal as I drink black. So for that reason, this mug is perfect because I can just make one cup. It's got this integrated sieve, and also it has a cover, which means you can then take out this sieve and put it on top of the cover wherever you are in your house and just enjoy your beautiful cup of tea. And then the other fantastic Christmas present I have received is a new e-reader, which is a Kobo. I have had my Kindle for the last 10 years and unfortunately it stopped charging properly, so it was time to switch. Loads of research has gone into it, and in the end I went with the older model, which is just a very straightforward small black and white Kobo. Let me know if you would like a video on this. I haven't started using it yet. I still need to set it up, but very much looking forward to trying it out. And yes, let me know if you would like a video on Kobo and maybe comparing Kobo to Kindle. So these were my two top Christmas presents. Also in December I finished my work at the local bookstore. Overall I really enjoyed it. In a lot of ways the job was not what I was expecting it to be, but this was always going to be a temporary gig just for the Christmas season. And actually I have a bit of news for the coming year, because towards the end of January I am starting a new job. I have not talked about my situation much on this channel. I'm trying to keep it as private as possible because I know most of you here to talk about books, but this kind of affects the channel a little bit because over the last year I had a part-time, very much flexible type of work, and I was able to work a lot from home. In 2026 I am going to work full time again, and this will be mostly outside the house, so I will definitely have less time to read books and also less time to film videos. However, I do plan to maintain my consistency and publish a new video every week. They may be a little bit shorter, although my videos were always slightly on a longer side, which I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, so maybe that's a good thing. In terms of reading, I am not worried too much because books are priority for me, and I have always been reading even with full-on corporate full-time jobs. I think I'm going to be fine. Okay, let's talk about my December books. So first of all, very quickly, in December I finally finished reading War and Peace, and I have a whole half-hour video on it, so I won't be going into the detail here, but overall, yes, I did like it a lot. I didn't love it for various reasons. Check out my video if you want to know why. However, this is still a solid read, and I'm looking forward to reading Anna Karenina because I can see Tolstoy and I getting along just fine, unlike with other Russian classic writers. And yes, I'm talking about Dostoevsky. In case you're wondering why I have never mentioned Dostoevsky on this channel, it's because Dostoevsky and we have a very complicated relationship, which is probably a topic for a whole other video. Anyway, if you want to know what I liked and what I disliked about War and Peace, I will link my review below. It also includes really useful tips and tricks on how to approach reading War and Peace if that's something that you are looking for. I'm grabbing my cup of tea again because the next book I don't have a copy of. This was The Artist by Lucy Steeds, nowhere near on my radar to read until I started working in a bookstore, and this was the book of the year as chosen by the booksellers, and so I thought I better read it if I am going to be talking about it to my colleagues or customers. This is set just after WW1 in France. The main protagonist, well, one of them is this young Englishman who goes to France to interview this very, very famous painter. The other protagonist is the painter's niece, and this is quite an atmospheric novel about creativity but also self-identity. There's a bit of romance there, a mystery as well with a couple of twists. One fairly predictable, the other one less so, and definitely loads of interesting paragraphs on art, and I can totally see why this book would have been chosen as the book of the year, because it has a very broad appeal and it's not a book that will be polarizing in any way. Now, let's talk about pros and cons. Writing is very sensual, very evocative. There's nothing wrong technically with the writing in the book. It's a very solid storytelling. The one word that comes to my mind when I think about this book and the story in there is lovely. This book is just lovely. It's a very safe recommendation for someone like your grandmother or your aunt or your mother, maybe, because there's nothing extreme in there. There's no extreme sex, there's no extreme violence, nothing too dark, and I think this is why I didn't like it. I found it slightly naive in the way it was written and sometimes even slightly preachy. The writer clearly had a very specific idea in her mind how we readers should feel and what we should be thinking about certain characters, some of whom seemed a little bit too black and white for me. And I personally don't like it when the writer decides for me how I'm supposed to be feeling about the characters or the events. It's like I was told what to think as opposed to just being shown and then being allowed to decide for myself. So yes, there was something about the way the story was unfolded. It just lacked nuance. I like my books to be a bit more meaty and to have more ambiguity and definitely less preachy, especially the theme of undervaluing female artists was just so spelled out. I think there is probably an audience for Lucy Steeds' writing. However, that audience is probably not me. After The Artist, I read my next Austen, which was Northanger Abbey. I have set myself this little bit of a ritual where every December I will read one of Jane Austen's books. Last year I read Pride and Prejudice. This year I thought it would be Emma, but then I decided to finish Northanger Abbey, which I did start in the summer, but because it was a library copy, I had to give it back. I had so many books on the go at the time. We follow here Catherine Morland, this 17-year-old, I think she's 17, who travels to Bath for a few weeks with a couple who are family friends. And while in Bath, she meets a few people there. Of course, we have a romance in here, but also a theme of friendship, a bit of a gothic theme as well, because we have this mysterious Abbey, where Catherine ends up spending some time too. The first few chapters had me in stitches. Probably actually the first quarter of the book had me in stitches. I'm not sure if you have to be sold on reading Austen or not. Nevertheless, I am reading you the first paragraph, which I think is just hilarious. No one who had ever seen Catherine Morland in her infancy would have supposed her born to be a heroine. Her situation in life, the character of her father and mother, her own person and disposition were all equally against her. I wish this type of humor continued to be seen throughout the rest of the book. We still see glimpses of it, of course, and throughout the whole novel you've got this sense that Austen is almost making fun out of her own storytelling, but that humor does fall away a little bit, and Austen did lose me in the second half of the book. I can totally see why this is not a favorite Austen for many people. This was her first book ever written. It wasn't published until after her death, but it was the first book ever written. So, of course, you can forgive it its imperfections because it's definitely a little bit less polished. It seems less revised, and also the romance in there is not entirely convincing. However, this is still unmistakably Austen. You still get her signature take on Victorian society restrictions and these subtle observations about human manners. You obviously also get a happy ending, and then you also have this more unique flavor of what seems to be as a bit of a parody of a ghost story. So, okay, maybe not a perfect Austen, but I still enjoyed it, and I still think this is a very entertaining book that is worth reading. And then in December, I have uncovered this masterpiece. Honestly, I have no idea where I've been not having read this novel until now. This is, of course, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Brontë, one of the top classics I read in 2025. Totally blew me away. I am thinking about this novel almost every single day. I did talk about this in my best classics video already. So here I just want to mention a couple of things that I didn't get a chance to say yet, which are Jane's inner life and how it was captured in this story. Because after reading this, and even after filming my best classics of the year video, I was trying to figure out why this novel grabbed me in a way that other books haven't, and why I found myself rooting so hard for Jane. And look, you know, there are probably hundreds of literature experts who have very sophisticated analysis on this, but my personal take is that the reason for that is the way Charlotte Brontë managed to capture Jane Eyre's inner life, which was so well fleshed out. You really get a full picture of Jane as this 100% realized character who is almost very much this living and breathing person with contradictions and desires and doubts and fierce intelligence and inner strength as well. And so what happens then, you as a reader, you feel her joy as sharply as her sadness, her misfortunes and her longing as painfully as her pride. And because she is portrayed so vividly, she becomes this mirror, and what we have is a portrait that feels intimate and in a way almost daring. And because of that daring element, we as readers, we feel like we are being seen, properly scene. For example, that part in the book where Jane is sitting with her friend in the orphanage, and Jane is explaining that the way she feels about people who hurt her is that she has every right to hurt them back, otherwise they will never be stopped. There's something about that paragraph that we can all relate to, and she is very, very real at that moment. And then of course you watch her whole journey, which we are captivated by, partly because of the paragraphs like the one that I've just mentioned. Just gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous piece of writing. I ended December with a short story collection, which I didn't know it was a short story collection. I found this book on the shelf of my bookstore. I opened it up and I read the first couple of sentences. Let me read them to you because you will understand why I just had to have it. Helga had always unreasonably expected more from life than it could deliver. People like her live among us, not differing conspicuously from those who instinctively settle their affairs and figure out precisely how, given their looks, their abilities, and their environment, they can do what they need to do in the world. With respect to these three factors, Helga was only averagely equipped. So yes, I just had to read it. I brought it home thinking this is a novella because I didn't even read what was on the back of the book, and I was surprised to discover this was a short story collection. However, even if you're not a short stories fan, which I'm not, you will love this because the writing in here is extraordinary. Of course, I was familiar with Tove Ditlevsen's name because I have heard about her trilogy memoir, which I will now definitely read, but I've never read anything by her. And the one short story in here that completely destroyed me was One Morning in a Residential Neighborhood, which I have, since filming my best books of 2025 video, I have reread, and there are some paragraphs here that I just kept underlining. A whip is raised over all of us. Where and whom will it hit? This is what I mean about the writing. All of the short stories here can hold their own. They very strong. The title story, The Umbrella, is, I believe, the most widely known. This was written in 1952. This book was not published until 2025. So this is fairly a recent book. And by the way, I have been really impressed with Penguin Archive, and what I have read so far, which have been 3 books altogether, I really liked. So I definitely plan on exploring more of their titles. Anyway, I was going to tell you about The Umbrella, the title story. So in that story, Ditlevsen is using an everyday object, an umbrella, but of course the story is not about an umbrella. That umbrella is just a gateway into telling us about the inner life of the main character in there, who is this newly married woman. There's something haunting and something very powerful about Ditlevsen's writing. I was turning pages as if it was the most engrossing, I don't know, mystery novel or something like that. For me, her writing is a bit of a crossover between Sylvia Plath and Deborah Levy as well. Anyway, this will take you probably a couple of hours to read max, so please, I highly encourage you to check it out. As is my monthly tradition, we are ending a monthly wrap-up with the word of the month. So that is a word that I have come across in the books that I have read this last month that I have never heard before. And this month's word comes from Jane Eyre on page 361, where we have Mr. Rochester talking to Jane. He is saying to her, your air was often diffident. According to the Oxford Dictionary, diffident means modest or shy because of a lack of self-confidence. So for example, you could have a diffident manner, or you could say a diffident youth. That's it for today's video. As we are in the middle of winter, I hope you're staying warm and cozy. And of course, I will see you as always next Friday. Bye for now.